all fired out of a direct point, a converging point. The crystals are actually refracting the light. They are refracting the energy of the soul, and they are shooting it out. But I had to find soul. And I found soul in two different forms, I think it was. It exists in gas, and it exists in a liquid form. The gas is obviously all around us because we know that deep focus is pulling it out of the air. The gas can also be found way down deep in the soul sanctum. When we're going through the soul sanctum, those soul containers, they're swirling gaseous soul. And so I could show, hey, there is gas. So we can pull it from there. The liquid form of it is the hot springs, or, and actually, I kind of almost overlooked this one, but our very own soul, oh nice, it's gone dark. Somebody yell at me when that happens. Our very own soul container literally has soul as liquid, bubbling and boiling in it. So now we can compress these, we can focus these. They can draw it from the air. They can take them down and they can focus them into lasers. However, they don't all use them the same way. The crystallized husk and the crystal or enraged guardian fire them very deliberately. And by this, I mean they are able to point it at us and then focus and shoot. Something to note about these two enemies, because they are essentially the same, except it specifically says that with the crystal or enraged guardian in the Hunter's Journal that it is an oversized husk. And that was super important to keep in mind. Because what happens is these crystals are infecting them. And they are literally draining their life and their soul from them. So even though a lot of these bugs are dead, they've been reanimated. And they still contain that soul. These crystals are draining that soul. And we can see that literally every time a crystallized husk shoots its laser at us. It shoots it at us, and then it's tired. And it has to take a moment to regroup. And I haven't even taken a drink yet. This is the worst Thirsty Thursday ever. It shoots and it has to recharge. It takes a moment. That's not just a gameplay mechanic to give us a moment to attack. That is literally because the soul is being drained from it. It's being drained from it to shoot that laser. And you say, Jeremy, the Crystal or Enraged Guardian doesn't do the same. And like I said, we have to keep in mind that it is a much larger overgrown husk. Larger containers, larger vessels are able to hold more soul. So even though it's draining the same amount, it is not nearly the same percentage that is being drained. But I mentioned a third enemy, and that was the Crystal Crawler. It fires a laser as well, and guys, I know all these names are really kind of out there, so if you're following along, awesome. If not, the Crystal Crawlers are basically the maze attack where they would just crawl around on the platforms and shoot laser beams out their back. These enemies don't seem to actually do it willingly. It's more timed, it's more sporadic, it's more uncontrolled. And that kind of blew my theory wide open. Because if I'm saying that, hey, these enemies are able to focus that beam of light and they're able to use it as a weapon, this guy should be able to as well. Until we go to the Hunter's Journal, and then my theory comes right back into play. Because the Hunter actually says that these beings, these Crystal Crawlers, are actually unaware. I legitimately think they were unaware in life as well. They were just used. They weren't actually a conscious thinking bug. Much like the Grimsteeds are used, but they can think. I believe this is more of a workhorse, more like the Glimbecks. They didn't actually have a real perception of things around them. So the crystals are now using them and just sucking their soul, and at random, they're focusing it and firing it. More or less timed, actually, not random. I don't want to say random. But this gives way to, hey, the Hunter's Journal already says they're not aware. That's why these aren't focused and fired at us. They're just going about doing what they were doing. Whereas the crystallized husk, the crystal or enraged guardians, they hold on to a specific task. They hold on to a specific part of them as well. They're able to not only attack, they're able to go along with what they were doing. The crystal crawlers, however, just keep crawling. They don't care. They're unaware. So unassumingly, and so much so that their soul being sucked from them isn't fired specifically at somebody. It's not fired towards somebody as a weapon. But that's not the only weapon we see with these crystals. We have the crystal hunter. And for many of us, that crystal hunter was a son of a bitch. They seem to know exactly where you're going to land, and they shoot a fast-growing crystal right the fuck there. 9 times out of 10, you jump on that son of a bitch, and it just pisses you off. But there was something new. There was a crystal that grew fast. We needed to see if this was anywhere else. And so I started looking around. And there's one really good example of it, and there's one that's just kind of okay. But it led straight into the theory we had already proposed, that these crystals had energy. So there's crystals growing on the crystal hunter. And from those crystals, it fires a seed, if you will. So crystals actually grow in a couple different ways. They grow under pressure, they grow under heat and stress, and carbon actually aligns into crystalline structures. Not just carbon, there's others as well. Just using that because diamonds are what I actually wound up looking at a lot. And then I found out these aren't diamonds. But they grow slowly. And these crystals are very strong, like diamonds. They're exceptionally strong. But there's another way diamonds can grow, and that's from a seed, they called it. And they can grow rapidly. And the best example I can actually give to this is the carbon chains in rock candy. And so if you want to do this experiment at home, by all means, you can make your own fucking crystal peak, and it's pretty cool. I did it with the kids. You boil some water, you dissolve sugar in it, you put whatever you want down into your cup. We just tied a string across with a popsicle stick going down into it, and then you put the dissolved sugars in there. The string or the popsicle stick, whatever you decide to use, is the seed. And that will allow those carbon chains to start to grow. And you will actually make your own rock candy. And but really overnight, it starts to grow and form crystals. But here's the problem with fast growing crystals. They're exceptionally weak. Well, why the shaman didn't end up like that? He just ended up stuck in crystal instead of... Oh, the shaman. Why did I say shaman? Man, we're getting to that, actually. I'm getting to the shaman. Give me 1 second. These crystals that fast grow are actually pretty weak. And much like rock candy, you drop it, it breaks. You drop a diamond, it holds together. So you have fast growing and slow growing crystals. When we see the crystals that are on the enemies, those were slow growing. They did not just pop up. We don't break those. But the crystal hunter shoots a seed and sprouts up very fast growing crystals. But we know, just like in real life, those crystals are brittle. They break literally with one swing of our nail. They're not tough. So where else can we find this? The best example I could find this was literally when we power up the crystal heart to do a dash. So that crystal heart says that we can focus that energy to, I believe it says, launch us forward or launch the user forward. So now those crystals grow out around us. But when we launch ourselves forward, that force, that momentum, that energy that's expelled breaks those crystals. They're again weak. And the second place we can find it is with the nail shaman. This is speculative. This is completely speculative, so just hear it out for a moment. That snail shaman is completely encapsulated in a crystal. When we dream nail him, I believe his dream nail is like free meat. He doesn't want to be in that crystal. That crystal had to overtake him, so it had to grow fast. It had to encompass him relatively quickly. He's caught. He's trapped. But just like every other example of quick-growing crystals shot from the crystal hunter, done by the crystal heart, they are fragile. And we are able to break that. And I believe that's where we get Descending Dark, if I remember correctly. I didn't actually go into the crystallized mound for any of this other than that one specific fact with the shaman, because I realized, hey, that's a weak crystal as well. So that can show us that, hey, there are fast-growing crystals. But with growing crystals, like I said, we have fast, we have slow. And in those crystals, we actually have the ability to form lenses. And we know this because we get deep focus. And with deep focus, hey baby, you looking sexy too. With the deep focus, we have another lens. But this time, it's not focusing it fast. It's not concentrating it. It's not bringing it down. It's actually spreading it out. It's a divergent lens. There are convergent and divergent lenses. And we know from deep focus's description that it is a natural forming charm. This charm formed out of those slow growing crystals, and it is different than all of the other crystals I can find up here. All of them go to a point. This one is much flatter. It's a divergent lens. It's going to spread the light. And we can see that as soon as we use it, because instead of focusing it and going fast, whereas our normal heal is one mask, this spreads it out. It takes longer because the soul is being spread out over a wider area. And that wider area is 2 masks instead of 1. Whereas with quick focus, it's taking that soul and it's literally forcing it, more or less, let's call it a funnel. And it's focusing it down to where we are getting 1 mask, but we are getting it exceptionally fast. So we have converging and diverging lenses. And guys, I don't deal with lenses. So if one of you guys are better on this, please get down in the comments. Look at that mustache. Baby, guess what? I actually grew this mustache, and my wife fucking hates it. And we were literally talking about it before the stream tonight, so I'm so glad you put that down in there. Because there's a debate going on in the Denson household right now as to whether or not it's getting shaved. But, yeah, so glad you noticed that. So I'm not a lens guy. I don't deal with that. If you guys can explain that one better, please, by all means, jump down in the comments. Let me know more, because I would love to learn personally. I did this research and I found out, hey, those are the 2 types of lenses. And then I kind of applied it to these 2 charms. And that's what we got. And it was kind of an amazing thing, because I can literally apply the science to the game and it works out perfectly as far as my understanding goes. And like I said, if my understanding is off, please let me know, but it works out really well. But then I had 2 more aspects, 3 more really, that I had to explain. We now know why we can focus soul, because we're gathering it from the air. We have 2 different types of lenses, converging, diverging. We have 2 charms. We have the diverging, the deep focus, and we have the converging, the quick focus. So we can explain why they can focus soul now. They're lenses. They literally tell us this in the description, and those lenses work out perfectly for how the charms work. So I moved on. I went to the crystals glowing. This one was a little harder. This one was a lot harder, because crystals naturally don't have energy unless you're talking about spiritual healing. And while I was researching this aspect of the crystals actually glowing, I ended up answering the 3rd aspect, that the crystals sing. So singing crystals is actually a thing, and it works out really well with what we hear in Crystal Peak. if you turn the music off and you go to certain parts, you hear the crystals.